Now we're going to talk a little bit about where we are in cognitive psychology by going away from cognitive psychology and looking at these sub areas within cognitive psychology that were inspired by cognitive psychology. So the first one we're going to talk about is cognitive science. Cognitive science is an interdisciplinary field that involves a collaboration between a lot of different disciplines. These disciplines are the most characteristic ones that you see associated with cognitive science are psychology, artificial intelligence, so that would be computer science, linguistics, philosophy, anthropology, and neuroscience. One of the reasons that all of these particular fields get together and join into this idea of cognitive psychology or science, is that there are certain things that they all are asking questions about. And a lot of that is knowledge representation, intelligence in humans, computer programs, and abstract theories. And so when you're taking this cognitive psychology course, you're going to see a lot of computer programs and modeling human behavior using programs, and then also trying to get programs are modeling human behavior, but then we're also trying to get computer programs to act more human-like or interact with others in a more computer-like fashion. And so there's an emphasis on intelligent behavior as computation. So very much so computational model, a computer science approach to, not a computer science approach, but this sort of computer metaphor approach to it. But that said, when we talk about neural network models and things like that, that's also a part of it. But lots of times those are represented as computers or in computers and models on computers. Cognitive neuroscience is also an offshoot on that. And so basically what that's looking at, from the names itself, you can tell, is where cognitive operations occur in the brain. One of the things that people are interested in is, well, we have an understanding of how cognition works, but if we understood the areas of the brain that we're engaging in these tasks, that might actually inform us more about what's actually going on when people are thinking or performing certain tasks or doing reasoning or any one of a number of things. So here I have PET and fMRI, but I'm actually going to be talking about other types of ways of looking at the brain in cognitive neuroscience. And you see a lot of this, you'll see an introduction to this in your textbook as well, and pretty much every single chapter has a cognitive neuroscience component to talk a little bit about the brain processes that are underlying a lot of the cognition that chapter talks about. So one of them is PET scans, positron emission tomography. Now basically the way that this works is that you're injected with a radioactive tracer, and then they scan the brain to look at those radioactive tracers. And so basically what it's looking at these tracers because they're going through the blood. And so like with fMRIs, you're basically measuring blood flow in different parts of the brain. There's advantages and disadvantages to using any sort of thing that you do. So when you're looking at positron emission tomography versus fMRI, you don't have to be as still as you would have to be in an MRI. So there's a little bit more movement. Like if you can actually talk, and that won't move the head around in such a way that's going to affect your ability to actually, register things correctly. But in fMRI, you have to be absolutely still for that to actually happen. A problem with PET scans is that the resolution is lower, so it's not as precise as what you would see in fMRI. And then you can look at the blood flow in it, but like I said, it's not the same sort of level as what you would see in MRI. And also, you've got radioactive tracers being put in your body, so there's only so much of PET scanning you can actually do with an individual before it starts getting dangerous. You have the EEG. Now this one is, you can actually do this in a regular lab, and like in Prial, you could do it in Prial if you have the equipment. And essentially you're wearing, this person looks like they have a see-through brain, but essentially it's just this little cap that they wear. And you have all of these little electrodes that register electric reading, like the firings of the neurons essentially, but groups of neurons. You can't do an individual neuron. And so there's different spots in the brain that are correlated with different areas of the brain, and you look to see the electrical functioning there. It can look at location. It can say, okay, this is about where it is. And actually, this is from one of the experiments that they were looking at, creativity using compound remote associates task. And so you could see over time, like the redder ones it starts right here where there's a lot of cognition going, the frontal lobe. And then you can see activity appear over on the right hemisphere as the processing occurs. And so this is another way to actually look at it. It's much cheaper than PET scans and fMRIs. And like I said, it can be done in a normal research lab. You don't have the precision that you have with PET scans or fMRI scans to see exactly where those processes are occurring in the brain. So here's our fMRI. It's a diagnostic technique and use magnetic fields and computerized images. It's magnetic fields, but it's still actually using blood flow because essentially it's there's a lot of water in blood. And so you're actually looking at the blood flow when you're using an fMRI machine as it goes in. And it's like the PET scan, it's used to locate the mental functions in the brain. And actually a lot of what you're going to see in the textbook that's involved with this, you're actually going to be seeing fMRI work. And basically, you could see the resolution actually when we go back to here's what it looks like from a PET scan, but then here you can see how more detailed it is for the fMRI scan. And lately, they've actually started doing fMRI scans on puppies to figure out what dogs actually think about when they're in there. Now, these dogs aren't being treated poorly. They've actually been trained to be comfortable lying in an fMRI machine. And then they do experiments. So the dog has learned how to, be perfectly still. And then you present stimuli to them, either visual stimuli like another dog or human or balls. And then you can look to see if it gets excited or how it feels about it. Or they'll hold up little Q-tips with scents on them. And then they look to see what parts of the brain, like the scent of their human as opposed to a scent of a human that they don't know. What parts of the brain do they light up? There's a little bit of a digression, but I think it's interesting. I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to talk about these different cognitive psychology paradigms that we're actually using to examine cognitive psychology.